When Ayaan moved into his grandfather's old house, the first thing he noticed was how still it was. Even the wooden floorboards, which looked like they should creak under every step, remained silent. The only sound was the slow tick of a grandfather clock in the hallway that hadn't told the right time in years. The bedroom he chose was small, with faded wallpaper and an old oak wardrobe in the corner. He didn't remember the wardrobe from childhood visits, but then again, he hadn't been back since he was 6, since his grandfather had vanished one stormy night without a trace. The first night passed uneventfully, but on the second night, as Ayaan lay in bed with the blankets up to his chin, he thought he saw the wardrobe door move. Just a twitch, barely anything. Maybe the wood settling, maybe the breeze, though there was no breeze. The windows were shut. He turned over, ignoring the chill creeping up his spine. At 3:13 a.m. he woke up. No sound, no light, but the wardrobe door was slightly open. He told himself he must have forgotten to close it. He got up, shut it tight, and went back to sleep. The third night, it happened again. 3:13 a.m. The door opened just an inch. This time, he left it. But the fourth night, something changed. Ayaan dreamt of whispers, not words, just soft murmurs brushing against his ears like spider legs. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, eyes darting to the corner of the room. The wardrobe was wide open. A figure stood inside, tall, motionless, its face hidden in shadow, no eyes, just watching. He couldn't move, he couldn't scream. The thing stepped out. Its body didn't bend or sway, just glided forward with stiff, unnatural grace. Ayaan's body refused to respond. He felt the weight of sleep holding him down, even though he was awake. Eyes wide, breath shallow. It stood at the foot of his bed. The clock struck 3:13. Then he blinked, and it was morning. The wardrobe door was closed. Everything looked normal, except for the muddy footprints leading from the wardrobe to the edge of his bed. Ayaan never spoke of it. He didn't leave the house. Night after night, the door opened, 3:13, until one morning the bed was empty. The house was quiet again, still. The only sign he had ever been there was the extra pair of muddy footprints now leading back into the wardrobe, and the door slowly swinging shut. Ayaan hadn't intended to return to his grandfather's house. Not really. But the letter from the lawyer was short and final. As the sole surviving heir, the property of Mr. Asif Rahman in Ranakhet now belongs to you, keys enclosed. He'd stared at the envelope in disbelief, half expecting a mistake. His grandfather had vanished 20 years ago, swallowed by a thunderstorm and the cold breath of a mountain night. They'd found his boots on the porch, nothing else. Ayaan was only 6 then, barely old enough to understand loss. His parents never spoke of it much. Old man Asif went mad toward the end, his mother once muttered when she thought Ayaan was asleep. He talked to shadows. The house stood on the edge of a forest, a 2-story colonial structure with moss creeping up the stone walls and ivy like green veins clinging to its face. It looked haunted by time itself. But Ayaan, now 26, a software engineer from Mumbai, had grown tired of the digital world and its empty noise. He arrived just before sunset. The air was sharp, clean, and too quiet. No birds, no insects. The key turned in the rusted lock with effort, and the heavy door groaned open like it resented being disturbed. Inside, dust ruled. A thin layer covered every surface like ash from a long-dead fire. Faded portraits stared down from the walls. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked slowly, but it was wrong. The time had frozen at 3:13. The moment he stepped over the threshold, Ayaan felt it. That thick, pressing silence, like the house was holding its breath. He dragged his suitcase upstairs. choosing the room at the end of the hall. It was small, but oddly clean. Perhaps it had been his grandfather's. Against the far wall stood a large oak wardrobe. It was old, much older than anything else in the house. Its surface was scratched and scarred, the handles carved like twisted faces in mid-scream. Ayaan stared at it for a moment, uneasy, before tossing a sheet over it. He'd clean it tomorrow. Ayaan spent the evening unpacking half-heartedly. The house smelled of damp wood, old paper, and something faintly sour, like dried milk in a forgotten glass. He opened the windows, hoping to air it out, but the wind that swept through was oddly cold for summer. He cooked instant noodles in the barely functioning kitchen. The stove hissed and clicked, like it remembered how to be dangerous. He ate standing up, staring out the back window into the dark tree line. The forest there was dense, almost too dense. Trees tangled like skeletal hands, their trunks black with age. He swore he saw something shift between them, but when he blinked, it was gone. At 10:37 p.m., he turned in for the night. The bedroom was dim, lit only by a bedside lamp that flickered slightly. He tried to ignore the wardrobe in the corner, now covered in the sheet. Its silhouette was massive, unnatural, like something too large trying to pretend it belonged. He thought about moving it out of the room entirely, but it didn't budge when he gave it a gentle nudge. "Well, you stay there then," Ayaan muttered. "Just don't open by yourself or anything cliché like that." He laughed to himself, but not loudly. Sleep didn't come easy. The mattress sagged in the middle like a mouth waiting to swallow him. He rolled onto his side, facing the wardrobe. The lamp clicked off. Silence. Stillness. For nearly an hour, Ayaan drifted in and out of a restless doze, plagued by memories of a funeral he hadn't attended, and a grandfather who whispered to walls. But eventually, exhaustion won. He slipped into uneasy dreams. He was 6 again. Rain lashed at the windows. Thunder cracked like gunfire. He was hiding under a table, clutching a toy truck with missing wheels. Footsteps echoed overhead. Slow, heavy. Then the door creaked open, and from his hiding spot, he saw feet, bare, pale, and streaked with mud. They didn't walk, they slid. The figure crouched, and all he could see was a smile, wide, frozen, wrong. A cold whisper brushed his ear. "He lives in the wardrobe now." Ayaan jolted awake. The room was dark, too dark. His heart thundered in his chest as he fumbled for the lamp switch. It clicked on, buzzing softly. And there it was. The sheet had slipped, just enough for one of the wardrobe doors to show. Open a crack. Just a crack. He hadn't opened it. He was sure. Still groggy, he walked over and shut it firmly. He even checked inside, half expecting mothballs or old coats, but the wardrobe was empty. Perfectly, eerily empty. He shut the door tight and placed a chair against it, chuckling nervously. "See? Nothing," he whispered, mostly to himself. As he climbed back into bed, a wind brushed through the room, but the window was closed, and behind him the wardrobe creaked softly. Ayaan woke late the next morning, sunlight weakly filtering through the curtains. The room felt strangely colder than the rest of the house, and he noticed goosebumps prickling along his arms, despite the summer heat. The wardrobe sat in the corner, doors shut, the chair still against it. He almost laughed at himself. Almost. He got dressed quickly and went out for a walk. Maybe some fresh mountain air would do him good. The village lay about a 20-minute walk downhill, and the trail behind the house led into the woods. His phone barely got a signal here, 1 bar, sometimes 2, but no internet. That was fine. He didn't come here to scroll. As he walked down the leaf-strewn path, something about the forest began to bother him. The trees were beautiful, ancient, but far too silent. He paused once or twice, turning to look behind him. Nothing. No birds, no squirrels, not even wind. Just the crunch of his own boots and the growing sound of his breath. At one point, he passed an old tree with a carving on it. Someone had etched a spiral, deeply and furiously into the bark. Around it were dozens of scratches, claw-like. Probably kids, he muttered, though there were no signs of life near the house. He bent down to get a closer look, and then, "Don't stare too long." He stood up straight, heart hammering. "Hello?" he called out. No answer. But he'd heard it. A whisper, just behind his right ear. He scanned the woods, still empty. He turned back toward the house, walking faster now. Something about the air felt heavier, like every step pushed against unseen pressure. By the time he got back, the sun was dipping lower than it should have been. Time had slipped. He went inside and locked the door. That night, Ayaan made sure the wardrobe was shut. The chair remained in front of it. He even wedged a book under the door. The Silent Grove, a collection of his grandfather's journal notes and old stories. He tried reading it to pass the time. "The man in the wardrobe does not knock," read one scribbled line. "He enters when forgotten." A chill ran down Ayaan's spine. He turned off the lamp. 3:13 a.m. He sat upright, heart pounding before his eyes even opened. The chair was no longer in front of the wardrobe. It was placed beside his bed. The wardrobe door was ajar, wide enough to see something inside. Not a shadow, not an object. An eye. Large, unblinking, yellowed. It blinked. Ayaan couldn't move, couldn't scream. He was frozen in a body that didn't feel like his. The eye slowly disappeared, and the wardrobe shut itself. Quietly, precisely. A rustle of wood. And then, nothing. His phone buzzed. No signal, no notification, just a time. 3:13. A cold voice whispered from under his bed. "He remembers you." Ayaan didn't sleep again that night. He lay stiffly in bed, not daring to look away from the wardrobe. Even when the sun's faint rays began bleeding through the curtains, he stayed frozen until the light filled the room. Only then did he dare to rise. He threw open the wardrobe doors with sudden fury. Empty. But it smelled. Not musty or old, but damp, like wet earth. Like something that had crawled out of the ground and never dried off. He dragged the whole thing away from the wall with surprising strength. Nothing behind it, no trapdoor, no secret space, just the wall, and a growing fear he couldn't rationalize. Later that morning, Ayaan returned to the silent grove, the notebook he'd wedged beneath the wardrobe door. It had belonged to his grandfather, filled with erratic handwriting and strange entries that blurred fiction with madness. He flipped past the first few pages until something caught his eye. July 17th, 1992. He watches from the wardrobe again. I covered the mirror with fabric. It didn't help. He doesn't reflect like we do. Ayaan swallowed. He turned the page. August 1st, 1992. He knows when I sleep. 3:13. Always 3:13. He feeds on attention. If you stare, he stares back. If you forget him, he comes closer. Then, August 9th, 1992, I saw him in my sleep, and I woke up holding mud in my hands. Real mud. From where? He comes from the soil, from beneath, but not hell. Something colder. Ayaan slammed the book shut. This had to be a coincidence. Maybe his grandfather had been mentally ill, consumed by loneliness and delusion. Maybe the eyes, the dreams, the voice were all just stress, isolation. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient was trying to climb back into the world through his sleep. By evening, Ayaan tried distracting himself by exploring the rest of the house. He hadn't gone into the attic yet. The wooden pull-down ladder groaned as he tugged the cord. The air that rushed down was ice cold. Dust motes floated like ash in the slant of dying sunlight. The attic was cramped, filled with boxes and old furniture draped in white sheets. In one corner, he found a pile of paintings, portraits, faces, all different, but their eyes were the same, too wide, too hollow, and behind every figure in every painting stood the same tall, long-limbed shadow, half faded into the background. Ayaan squinted, lifting one portrait closer. His skin went cold. The shadow in this painting had a mouth, too big, too wide, a perfect, hateful smile. He dropped the canvas. The floor creaked loudly. Behind him, he heard a low voice, rasping and slow. "You shouldn't have seen that." He turned. Nothing. Just dust. But the smile lingered in his mind. Ayaan barely made it back downstairs without breaking into a run. He stood in the middle of the hallway, heart pounding, trying to convince himself that stress, sleep deprivation, and suggestion were all conspiring to play tricks on his senses. "No one's here," he whispered to himself, clenching his fists. "There's no one else here." But the portraits in the attic burned behind his eyes. The smiles, the shadow, that voice, that sentence. "You shouldn't have seen that." It hadn't echoed. It hadn't come from behind him, or above him, or even the walls. It had come from inside his head. By evening, Ayaan tried distracting himself by exploring the rest of the house. He hadn't gone into the attic yet. The wooden pull-down ladder groaned as he tugged the cord. The air that rushed down was ice cold. Dust motes floated like ash in the slant of dying sunlight. The attic was cramped, filled with boxes and old furniture draped in white sheets. In one corner, he found a pile of paintings, portraits, faces, all different, but their eyes were the same. Too wide, too hollow. And behind every figure in every painting stood the same tall, long-limbed shadow, half faded into the background. Ayaan squinted, lifting one portrait closer. His skin went cold. The shadow in this painting had a mouth. Too big, too wide. A perfect, hateful smile. He dropped the canvas. The floor creaked loudly. Behind him, he heard a low voice, rasping and slow. "You shouldn't have seen that." He turned. Nothing. Just dust. But the smile lingered in his mind. Ayaan barely made it back downstairs without breaking into a run. He stood in the middle of the hallway, heart pounding, trying to convince himself that stress, sleep deprivation, and suggestion were all conspiring to play tricks on his senses. "No one's here," he whispered to himself, clenching his fists. "There's no one else here." But the portraits in the attic burned behind his eyes. The smiles, the shadow, that voice, that sentence. You shouldn't have seen that. It hadn't echoed. It hadn't come from behind him, or above him, or even the walls. It had come from inside his head. Later that night, Ayaan tried to work on his laptop, hoping routine would tether him to reality. But the screen flickered now and then, faint shadows passing across it like someone walking behind him. Only, of course, there was no one there. The clock ticked, ticked, ticked. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed once. Ayaan's breath caught. He got up, walked toward it slowly. It wasn't supposed to work. He opened the glass face and looked at the hands. They were moving, and they were moving backward. The time ticked down toward 3:13. He backed away and returned to his room. He was done being curious. He double-locked the door, shoved the wardrobe back against the wall as tightly as it would go, and even hammered a chair between the handles. It creaked in protest. "I don't care," Ayaan muttered. "You're staying closed." He lay in bed with all the lights on, phone in hand, no signal, just the slowly draining battery percentage mocking him, 13%. He blinked. The next thing he knew, it was dark. The lights were off. The phone was dead. The room was freezing. His throat seized. He turned his head slightly toward the wardrobe. Still shut, still braced with the chair. But scratch, scratch. His eyes widened. It wasn't coming from the wardrobe. It was coming beneath him, from under the floorboards. Slow, deliberate clawing, like fingernails dragging through rotting wood. Scratch, drag. Scratch, drag. His bed shook slightly, just enough for him to feel it. He froze. And then, knock. From inside the floor. 1, 2, 3. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause. Then something breathed. Wetly, deeply, like lungs waking up after years underground. Morning light returned with a dull gray hue, like the sun itself didn't want to see what was in that house. Ayaan sat in bed, staring at the wardrobe. He hadn't moved once during the night. And now the chair wedged into the wardrobe handles was gone, replaced by muddy handprints. 2 of them, pressed against the wood like someone inside had tried to push it open from within. Ayaan barely spoke aloud that morning. He moved mechanically, brushing his teeth with trembling hands, glancing at the wardrobe every few seconds as if it might lurch forward. It didn't. But the muddy handprints remained, streaked, pale brown, drying into strange patterns, not like normal handprints, too long, too narrow, 5 fingers but bent oddly, like branches shaped the wrong way. He considered cleaning them off but hesitated. Something deep in his chest told him not to touch them. Instead, he paced, for hours. The events of the last few nights spiraled in his head. Sleep deprivation, maybe, paranoia, hallucinations brought on by isolation, or something worse. At noon, he stood in the center of the room and looked down. The scratching, the knock, the breathing. It came from beneath the bed, beneath the floor. He dropped to his knees and ran his fingers along the wooden panels. Some of the boards felt loose. His grandfather must have known, maybe even placed something here. He pried at the seams with a butter knife from the kitchen. The 4th board gave with a sharp pop and a burst of stale, earthy air. Inside was a hollow, and in it, wrapped in cloth, was a letter. No, several letters. Faded paper, edges brown with age. He unfolded the top one. It was addressed not to him, but to himself. Ayaan, If you are reading this, then the house has already started waking him up again. He blinked. His hands trembled slightly as he read on. He doesn't like being ignored. He comes from the silence beneath. If he scratches, don't answer. If he knocks, don't knock back. Never look directly into the wardrobe mirror if it shows a reflection that is not your own. Ayaan's mouth went dry. There was no mirror in the wardrobe. At least, he thought there wasn't. He hadn't looked that closely. He is not a ghost. He is not a demon. He is a memory the world forgot, a hunger that wears faces. He showed me yours once, years ago. That's how I knew your time would come. There is one way to delay him. Keep the wardrobe closed. Never let it see the moonlight. Never sleep with the door open. And never let him into your dreams twice. Ayaan folded the letter carefully. The other letters had more writings, sketches, names, rituals, notes written in what looked like frantic scrawlings from a man on the edge. He suddenly realized he was breathing too loudly. He glanced around the room. Everything was quiet again. Too quiet. He rose slowly and found that the wardrobe door was open again. Just a crack. But this time, there was something hanging on the inside. A mirror, oval-shaped, framed in black, and in it, his own face. Only it blinked. Before he did, Ayaan staggered backward, knocking over a lamp. Glass shattered, but he barely heard it over the roaring silence in his ears. He stared at the mirror. The face inside stared back. His face, yes, but not quite. There was something wrong with the eyes. Too pale, too wide. They twitched unnaturally, as if trying to escape the sockets. The smile was too stiff, too deliberate, like it had been carved into flesh. The reflection moved its hand. Ayaan didn't. It waved, a slow, taunting wave. He slammed the wardrobe shut and drove a nail into the handles using the heel of his boot. His hands were shaking so violently it took 4 tries. Then he pushed the heavy desk in front of it, knocking over books and a lamp in the process. He didn't care. He wanted it gone, out of sight, out of thought. The rest of the day passed in a haze. He didn't eat, didn't answer the buzzing landline when it rang out of nowhere, 3 times exactly at 3:13 p.m. He unplugged the phone. He sat on the porch briefly, staring into the woods, half hoping he'd see someone, a hiker, a stranger, anyone to confirm he wasn't losing his mind. But the woods didn't move. They seemed to listen. That night, Ayaan read more of his grandfather's letters. He copies what he sees, not just your face, but your gestures, your laughter, your memories. He peels them from you like skin from fruit, until he walks better in your life than you do. The last time I saw him, he was wearing my father's coat, the same coat buried with him. That was how I knew he doesn't just watch, he takes. I tried to warn the others. No one listened. They thought it was grief, madness, but they didn't see his teeth in my dreams. The letter ended abruptly. The next one was mostly drawings, spirals, eyes, a warped figure standing behind someone's bed in every sketch, always half faded into black scribbles. Then the last page. You won't escape if you run. The house binds him. But outside, he follows. In mirrors, in shadows, in sleep. Especially in sleep. A knock rang through the room. Ayaan jumped so violently that the notebook fell from his lap. He stood. It came again. Not from the wardrobe, not from the door, from the window. He turned. There, beyond the glass, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a tall figure, motionless, smiling. Its face was his, only this one was still waving. Ayaan froze at the window. His breath fogged the glass, but the face outside didn't fog its own side. It was clearer than the night itself, staring directly at him with pale, perfect mimicry. He slowly stepped backward, heart threatening to punch through his ribs. The wardrobe creaked behind him. He didn't dare turn. He couldn't face both versions of himself at once. The wind picked up. Leaves flew across the porch outside. The figure beyond the window raised one long, twisted hand and pressed it against the glass. Flesh met glass, and the glass bent. Like something from a dream. Ayaan did what he hadn't done since he'd arrived. He screamed. The light bulbs burst. The mirror inside the wardrobe shattered with a sound like someone crying underwater. Darkness swallowed the room. And then the window opened from the outside. Wind and leaves burst in, and so did the figure. Only now, it wasn't him. Not quite. Its face was wet and raw, like a mask, half-formed, features smeared like wet paint. It smiled, teeth crooked, eyes empty. "Finally awake," it whispered, voice cracked like dead bark. "You left the door open long enough." The wardrobe door slammed open behind Ayaan. Hands, wet, mud-soaked, reached out. Fingers wrapped around his arms, legs, neck. They weren't pulling, they were inviting, embracing. A second voice whispered in his ear, "Sleep again. I'll walk for you." The figure stepped forward and merged with Ayaan, walked into him like slipping into an old coat. His scream was swallowed, not muffled, consumed. 1 week later. Ayaan was seen in town. Polite, quiet. Said he was settling into the house. "Inherited from my grandfather," he smiled. "Wonderful old place." But those who looked closely swore something was wrong. His eyes blinked out of sync. His voice occasionally stuttered, repeating the same syllable twice. Nice to meet you." And no one ever saw him after dark. When a curious old postman asked how he liked living in such a remote house, Ayaan replied with a dry grin, "Oh, I'm not alone. He's still with me. He walks now, in me. I watch from behind the mirror. I try to scream, but the glass swallows it. I dream, but only his memories. I'm fading. He is learning to be me better than I ever was." If you find this letter, burn the wardrobe. Do not sleep beneath its shadow, and never, ever look into the mirror at night. He learns by watching. He's watching you now. The end.